On this day, the 11th of February, 1466 and 1503, the birth and death of Elizabeth of York. Direct ancestress of every English and British monarch since she sat on the throne, Elizabeth of York led a fascinating life. The oldest child of Edward IV and Elizabeth Woodville, she was born on this day in 1466. She was the centre of marriage plans from a young age, most notably to the Dauphin, the heir to the King of France. That marriage would never come to fruition, but another, perhaps less likely one, did. When her father was expelled from his kingdom in 1470, the 4-year-old Elizabeth was driven into sanctuary at Westminster Abbey with her pregnant mother and 2 younger sisters. They were rescued 6 months later when her father returned. The next decade was spent as a royal princess, including her father's grand plan to marry her to the heir to the French throne. Fresh problems erupted for Elizabeth in 1483. In April, her father passed away aged just 40, and her world quickly came crashing down. Before her little brother Edward V could arrive in London, she was in sanctuary again at Westminster, now aged 17. She would remain there for almost a year, as her parents' marriage was declared illegal, her and her siblings were proclaimed illegitimate, and her uncle took the throne as King Richard III. Elizabeth and her sisters emerged from sanctuary on the 1st of March 1484, after Richard III swore a public oath to protect them and find them suitable marriages. Christmas 1484 was a glittering spectacle, with Elizabeth and her Aunt Anne, the Queen, changing dresses throughout the evening. More controversy came in 1485, though, after the Queen's death. Richard was forced to make an embarrassing public statement denying rumours that he poisoned his wife and planned to marry his niece Elizabeth. The story was probably a deliberate and malicious twisting of the ongoing negotiations for a marriage between Richard and Joanna of Portugal. As part of the talks, a match was being finalised between Elizabeth and Duke Manuel, who would later become King Manuel I. It was a marriage beyond Richard's promise to find gentlemen for his nieces, but was confused into a story that Richard planned to marry his own niece himself, doubtless by the king's enemies who sought to discredit him. As part of the growing plot to overthrow Richard and replace him with Henry Tudor, the exiled claimant to the earldom of Richmond, an agreement was reached between his mother, Lady Margaret Beaufort, and hers, Elizabeth Woodville, to marry the pair. For Yorkists who had supported Edward IV but could not work with Richard III, it offered a restoration of Edward's line. For Margaret and Henry, it offered a spectacular return to England from an exile with few prospects. In August 1485, Henry invaded and defeated Richard at the Battle of Bosworth. He became king, and, having secured a papal dispensation for their marriage and been nudged by Parliament, he married Elizabeth on the 18th of January 1486. The couple had 4 children who survived infancy, and several that didn't. Arthur was Prince of Wales and was trained to succeed his father almost from birth. Margaret became Queen of Scotland and an ancestress of the Stuart monarchs. Henry, originally the second son, was created Duke of York, but when his brother Arthur died, he became heir to the throne, eventually succeeding his father as the infamous Henry VIII. The youngest, Mary, was Queen of France briefly before marrying Charles Brandon, Henry VIII's best friend. Arthur died in 1502, and Elizabeth fell pregnant soon afterwards. She and Henry reportedly consoled each other after the devastating loss of their heir and had apparently become very close by this point. On the 2nd of February 1503, Elizabeth gave birth to a daughter named Catherine, but the child did not live long. Succumbing to a postpartum infection, Elizabeth herself also died on the 11th of February 1503, her 37th birthday. Henry's reputation for miserliness dates mostly from after Elizabeth's death, suggesting that she was a good influence on him and that he missed her after she died. The couple were reunited in the magnificent tomb that Henry provided for them both in his new Lady Chapel at Westminster Abbey. The extraordinary life of Elizabeth of York both began and ended on this day, 37 years apart, in 1466 and 1503.